everybody, and welcome back. My name is Kursov, and welcome back to another video. And today, ladies and gentlemen, we are here for the first deck profile of the Duel Academy GX format. And I have for you guys what I believe is probably the best way and the only playable way to play Elemental Hero. I do want to give a huge props and a huge shout out to Ninjetti Ursus from Checkmate. This deck is basically his creation, and I was given permission to use it for content. So we are here for some fantastic content here, and a deck that I believe is actually weirdly viable. So without any further ado, let's start talking about Rampart Burn. Let's go ahead and start off the way we always do, and that is by talking about the skill card. The skill for Rampart Burn is indeed Fusion Party. Fusion Party has become a crazy skill in this format because we have access to actual good fusion monsters like Destiny and Dragoon as a fantastic example. This deck does not make use of a card like Dragoon. Instead, our fusion summon target is Elemental Hero Rampart Blaster. This card is a fusion of both Burstinatrix and Clayman, and it can basically attack directly while it's in defense position, which is a very, very cool ability. Oh, but if it attacks directly, it does half the damage. But it's a really, really cool ability and pairs very well with a burn strategy. So, Fusion Party is our skill for this deck. Moving off into the cards here. First off, we have one copy of Elemental Hero Burstinatrix and one copy of Elemental Hero Clayman. These are our fusion materials for Elemental Hero Rampart Blaster, and we play one of each. Why one of each? Because they're searchable off of reinforcements. If you can search the card, you don't need to play multiple because they're literally only used to pair with your skill. Barring that, they're pretty bad. Clayman is at least a 2000 defender, which is very useful, but Burstinatrix is actually just basically unplayable. But they summon a monster that pairs very, very well with the deck, so we need both of the materials. And of course, they're both searchable, so we technically play 4 copies of each with 3 copies of Rhoda. But why play 3 copies of Rhoda with only 2 E-Hero targets? Well, that is because our next card is 3 copies of DD Warrior Lady. This is basically the best staple from the GX box, but not only that, potentially just the best staple of the format. It is a fantastic monster. It is the best removal. It deals with Izana. It deals with Dragoon. It deals with a bunch of the boss monsters. Punishes your opponent for swinging into it. And it's searchable. So we're playing not 3 copies of DD Warrior Lady, but moving on to the spells and the only spells in the deck, we're technically playing 6 copies of DD Warrior Lady as we have 3 copies of Rhoda to search it. So we have 5 reinforcements targets in this deck, that being our 3 DD Warrior Ladies and our 2 Elemental Heroes right here. And yeah, you basically search whatever you need. Honestly, most times you are searching a DD Warrior Lady, but if you did already have access to one of the materials, or you've already burned your opponent a good bit and you can summon out your Rampart Blaster, it's definitely good to search the potential missing material and go in and just keep on beating down your opponent here. But we're not talking about the extra deck yet, so let's keep moving on with the main deck, continuing into the trap cards here. We play a very, very heavy trap lineup in this deck, which does make us susceptible to something like Jinzo. But when you play 6 copies of DD Warrior Lady, Jinzo isn't necessarily the biggest of issues. You do have an answer to it. But, like I said, lots of traps. And our first trap to start off with here is Wall of Disruption, or as you'll hear it referred to a lot, Wall of D. What this does is basically your opponent, if they declare an attack, All attack position monsters your opponent controls lose 800 attack for each monster they control. It's kind of like, it's similar to a Mirror Force, where if your opponent leaves multiple monsters in attack, then they get punished. So they need to play around Wall of D similarly to how they play around Mirror Force, by either not committing more monsters or not putting them all in attack position. Wall of D is huge because it is permanent removal and can make your opponent's monsters just completely dead. And when you're playing a deck that's burning, if you can just clog up your opponent's board if they don't have any monarchs, you're honestly feeling amazing. If they just have a bunch of 0 attack monsters, or a bunch of monsters that are maybe potentially locked down by our next trap, that being Floodgate Trap Hole, your opponent just can't do anything. And if you have Rampart Blaster on the field, you're just swinging in for 1,000, and it's a 4-turn clock. And if they can't do anything to deal with that, well, you're in a pretty solid position. Speaking of locking down, the next card we have here is 3 copies of our first burn card in Rampart Burn, that being Nightmare Wheel. If you flip up a Nightmare Wheel, you're dealing 500 extra damage per turn, along with your Rampart just swinging in directly. That's pretty solid. And then, of course, the last card we have is 3 copies of the best burn card, and the card that needs to be banned, Zoma the Spirit. Honestly, this deck can definitely function without Zoma, but Zoma is just too important not to add. Plus, it gives you some more monsters, some more bodies. So if you do need to get aggressive, or if you want to get aggressive, get an attack in, make them a little bit lower, and then focus on your burn strategy, you have that option. I will say as well, Floodgate Trap Hole and Nightmare Wheel pair very well together because they can't stop your wheel by booking your monster. And Floodgate, just like I said, just locking up all your opponent's zones is absolutely huge in this deck. Very, very cool. That's our entire main deck though. So moving off into our extra deck, we have the boss monster of the deck, Elemental Hero Rampart Blaster. This is honestly arguably the best Elemental Hero fusion that we have right now. Plasma Vice is very, very good. The piercing is nice, but Rampart Blaster is very strong in the fact that it can attack while in defense position directly. Just the damage that's dealt is halved. So you swing in with your Rampart Blaster in defense, you deal 1,000 damage to your opponent. This is a 4-turn clock. But what's much more important about the fact that Rampart attacks in defense is that it plays around Wall of D. Wall of Disruption is a huge staple of this format already, but it only affects attack position monsters. So having a monster like Rampart Blaster that can attack in defense completely plays around Wall of D and just nullifies its effect on your deck. So if you've already stuck this monster and you're swinging in, they need a different way to stop it than, well, Wall of D. Booking it, maybe, and then you could force your opponent so they have to flip it up into attack position. Sure, there's a few ways to get around this card, but if you've exhausted a lot of your opponent's resources, which DD Warrior Lady does, like, people spend resources to stop that card because it is terrifying. Rampart Blaster just comes in late game and just cleans up easily. I never summon this card early game, but when I summon it late game, it basically just seals it up. There's nothing my opponent can do. They couldn't play through my whole back row. Now I have a 2500 defender. They've used up a lot of their monsters or a lot of their outs or whatever, and I'm just hitting them for 1,000 after they've already lost X or Y amount of life points. Plus, most people are playing Cosmic Cyclone, Spell, and Trap removal, so if they want to flip a Cosmic, good job. Now it's a 3-turn clock with Rampart Blaster. Thank you for the burn help. The rest of the extra deck is basically just a bunch of waking targets. We have 1 Cyber End Dragon, 1 Arcana Knight Joker, 1 Destiny End Dragoon, 1 Ojama King, and 1 Thousand Eyes Restrict. I will be bringing you guys a new standard extra deck for Waking a little bit later on, But with this deck currently, this is what it's looking like with just one Waking, as I am actually siding a Waking. Just because your deck is so back row heavy and people are going to want to be hitting your back row, you can definitely bait out some stuff with a Waking or side it in when you see Triple Breaker or a lot of Cosmics, or people might be on some Dust Tornadoes now. Very, very solid though. So you can actually access every single card in your extra deck here, especially the Rampart Blaster. And this is the one that's big for your strategy. Finally, moving off into the side deck here. First off, we have 2 copies of Diffusion. Why Diffusion? Because Dragoon Turbo is very, very popular, and Diffusion just deals with it. It just outs it, it just gets rid of it, and honestly, Dragoon can be a pretty big issue for this deck. If you can't DD Warrior Lady it away, and they can just start popping your monsters, well, eventually you will run out of resources, you know, if you didn't stop it early enough. The deck runs Cosmic usually, which helps get rid of your Nightmare Wheels if you try to lock down the Dragoon. It also runs Books, which gets rid of your Nightmare Wheels as well. If you didn't Floodgate the Dragoon on Summon, there's not much you can do about it, and it'll just keep removing your monsters. Next off, we have 2 copies of Book of Moon. This is for like Moth more than anything else, and also if you do see a Jinzo, this is literally your only way to deal with Jinzo. You side in 2 Book of Moons, and you hope you see them if you didn't hit a Warrior Lady. Plus, Book can help stop your opponent from slamming into Warrior Lady with something besides the Jinzo, and hopefully can help get you into that Jinzo removal. And the final cards is the 1 copy of Waking the Dragon, which I mentioned earlier. If your opponent's on a lot of back row removal, great card. And the last one, which is like probably one of my favorite side deck cards of this format, is 1 copy of Straight Flush. This card is absolutely absurd. If you flip this on your opponent, like, you are feeling amazing. Absolutely amazing. You just went 1 for 3. You outed 3 of your opponent's cards, completely cleared their back row. They have no protection, and you can just hit in with a Rampart, or if they didn't summon any monsters and only set back row, you can hit in with a Warrior Lady. It helps so much. More than anything, it helps you win against other burn decks. Some burn decks might have a little bit of an edge on you if they're playing, say, for example, the David skill, which doesn't neg them, but instead pluses them. And then they just run a bunch more generic good cards. This card helps tremendously. Also makes your opponent play a little bit more stupid, and I will say, if you are playing this deck in games 2 and 3, you might not want to set all 3 and play around Straight Flush, because this card can literally just ruin it for you. Very, very solid side deck card, plus it's great versus Crystal Beasts. Highly recommend running it if you're not already. But ladies and gentlemen, that's it. That is the best Elemental Hero deck of the format. Yes, I know, it only plays 3 Elemental Heroes, the Burstinatrix, the Clayman, which you never summon, and the Rampart Blaster, which helps towards a burn strategy. I know it's not what a lot of you are hoping for. It's not what you guys might have wanted out of Elemental Heroes, but it's what you got, so you gotta put up with it. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. Thank you for watching the very first deck profile on the channel for this format, and I hope you guys are looking forward to more videos from Cursive YGO. That's a wrap, guys, and I'll catch you all very soon for another video. Peace.